शैलद्रोणीभिरक्रीडम् शैलद्रोणीभिरक्रीडम् सर्वदुषु गुणान्द्रुमे सर्वदुषु गणान्द्रुमा दधारलोकपालना दधामलोकपालना एक एव पृथक्गुणा शैलद्रोणीभिरक्रीडम् सर्वदुषु गुणान्द्रुमे दधार लोकपालना एक एव पृथग्गुणा शैलद्रोणीभिरक्रीडम् सर्वऋतुषु गुणान्द्रुमे दधार लोकपालना एक एव पृथग्गुणा. Any question about this? Please repeat.
Sarvatushu Gunandruma Dadaralokapalana Ekaiva Prithagguna Shaladronirbirakridam Sarvatushu Gunandruma Dadaralokapalana Eka eva Prithagguna Shaladronirbirakridam Sarvadushu Gunandrumaha Dadaralokapalanam Eka eva Prithagguna Shaladronibhirakridam Sarvadushu Gunandrumaha Dadaralokapalanam Eka eva Prithagguna.
Shaila, the hills and mountains, Druniki, with the valleys between them. Akridam, pleasure grounds for Sarva, all. Ratushu, in the seasons of the year, different qualities, fruits and flowers, the plants and trees, Sadhara, executed, Lokapalana, of the other demigods in charge of different departments of natural activity. Different departments of natural activity. Eka, alone. Eva, indeed. Prithak, different. Gunan, qualities. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. The valleys between the mountains became the fields of pleasure for Hiranyakashipu, by whose influence all the trees and plants produced fruits and flowers profusely in all the seasons. The qualities of pouring water, drying and burning, which are all qualities of the three departmental heads of the universe, namely Indra, Vayu, and Agni, were all directed by Hiranyakashipu alone without the assistance from the demigods. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It is said at the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, Tejovari Pradam Yatha Vinimayaha. This material world is conducted by fire, water, and earth, which combine and take shape. It is mentioned that the three modes of nature, Prithak Gunan, act under the direction of the different demigods. For example, King Indra is in charge of pouring water. The demigod Vayu controls the air and dries up the water, whereas the demigod Controlling the fire burns everything. Hiranyakashipu, however, by dint of his austere performance of mystic yoga, became so powerful that he alone took charge of everything without the assistance from the demigods. We will read text 19 as well. Saitam nirjita kahu ekarat vishayan priyan yatopajosam bhunyan natrapyat ajitendriya. In spite of achieving the power to control in all the directions, and in spite of enjoying all types of dear sense gratification as much as possible, Hiranyakashipu was dissatisfied because instead of controlling his senses, he remained their servant. Comments by Srila Prabhupada. This is an example of asuric life. Atheists can advance materially and create an extremely comfortable situation for the senses. But because they are controlled by the senses, they cannot be satisfied. This is the effect of modern civilization. Materialists are very much advanced in enjoying money and women, yet dissatisfaction prevails within the human society because human society cannot be happy and peaceful without Krishna consciousness. As far as material sense gratification is concerned, materialists may go on increasing their enjoyment as far as they can imagine. But because people in such material condition are servants of their senses, they cannot be satisfied. Hiranyakashipu was a vivid example of this dissatisfied state of humanity. ओमज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यामृतं स्थापितं येन स्वयं रूप तदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीरुद्रापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगना रघुनाथामितं तं सजीवम् साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेव श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारे निर्विशेषेश शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशधारिणे नमो महावदन्याय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नामिने गौरतुषे नमः हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबन्धु जगन्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्त श्री राधा कान्त नमोस्तुते तप्त काञ्चन गौराङ्गी श्री राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये नीलाचल निवासाय नित्याय परमात्मने बलभद्र सुभद्राभ्यां श्रीजगन्नाथाय ते नमः वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः हे श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानन्द श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौरभक्तवृन्द हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम हरे राम 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 हरे हरे मुखं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरो दीनतारिणं परमानन्दमाधवं श्रीचैतन्यमीश्वरम् Hare Krishna. So I seek the blessings of His Grace Mukti Avinda Prabhuji, His Grace Vanmali Pandit Prabhu and all the devotees assembled here, so that we can make some small attempt to glorify the Lord and the devotees of the Lord, and to remain absorbed in those glories. The valleys between the mountains became the fields of pleasure for Hiranyakashipu, by whose influence all the trees and plants produced fruits and flowers profusely in all the seasons. The qualities of pouring water, drying, and burning, which are all qualities of the three departmental heads of the universe, namely Indra, Vayu, and Agni, were all directed by Hiranyakashipu alone without assistance from the demigods. In spite of achieving the power to control all the directions, and in spite of enjoying all types of dear sense gratification as much as possible, Hiranyakashipu was dissatisfied because instead of controlling his senses, he remained their servant. Text 18 is like the adjective, and the actual state of Hiranyakashipu is described in text 19. The state of dissatisfaction, being the slave of the senses. Or rather, so to say, text 18 in very lofty, text 18 talks about a very lofty, so this lofty description of the Hiranyakashipu's control is only an external packaging, but the real inner state is of complete uncontrol. So that is what is being highlighted here. And Srila Prabhupada is highlighting on the dissatisfied state of humanity. The Shastras describe that Lord Shri Krishna is the only Vastava Vastu, the only substantial deity is Lord Shri Krishna. And everything else has no substantiality. Because the presentation of everything else is on the foundation of illusion. That material nature and material manifestation is all in and all. This premise is based on illusion. And because the entire presentation of this material world is based on illusion, it does not have any substantiality. So it is like adding any number of zeros is going to give a result zero. It does not matter how many zeros we add. So only if something is substantial, it can only if there is some substantiality in an activity, in a manifestation, in something, can it integrate to something valuable or tangible. But if it is based on illusion, then it is all zero, and the integral of that is zero, and that is why Nothing material can satisfy a person, even if one gets the sovereignty of all the worlds. We are seeing Hiranyakashipu has got the sovereignty of all the three worlds, but dissatisfied because all these accolades are based on the premise, the foundation of illusion, and therefore these accolades they integrate to something to nothing. They integrate to nothing. And that is why there is the state of dissatisfaction. Now, therefore, the Shastras are describing that one can only be satisfied when one's mind is absorbed in Krishna and the lotus feet of the Lord, because Lord Krishna is the substantial uh, shelter, and therefore only Lord Krishna is the worthy shelter. But when one does not choose to surrender to Krishna, then one is accepting and voting for the sovereignty of one's senses, which are governed by the mind. So practically, so if one is not choosing Krishna, then one is choosing the sovereignty or accepting the sovereignty of the mind. And that in multifarious effects, Prabhupada explains in different phases, in different places, how that in multifarious ways leads to dissatisfaction of the heart. The first aspect, Srila Prabhupada explains that no matter whatever one can achieve in this world, there is always something which is going to be missing. The first aspect is the missing. That the first aspect of how the sovereignty of the mind inevitably and perpetually leads us to dissatisfaction. The first aspect is there is always something missing. Something is always missing. No matter whatever be the case, there will be one small thing which will be missing. And very interestingly, the nature of that one small thing which is missing is that it overwhelms and spoils everything else. Srila Prabhupada gives the example of uh, Srila Prabhupada gives the example of lion. And lion is a very powerful animal. Lion is so powerful. And people say that, okay, as powerful as lion, as dashing as lion, as uh, as assertive as lion. And then many times people feel that, okay, one should be like a lion. One should walk like a lion, one should roar like a lion. And Prabhupada explained the example of a lion. And Prabhupada said, so Prabhupada explains this beautiful phenomena that the lion is always accompanied by a small bird. And Prabhupada says, I don't know what that bird is called in English, but in Bengali it is called as Feyu. So I also only know what it is called in Bengali. Because the Prabhupada says in the lecture, in Bengali it is called as Feyu. Feyu, that small bird is called as Feyu. Uh, and the small bird is always uh, uh, accompanying the lion wherever the lion goes. And interestingly, the small bird is always very enthusiastic. Extrovertation, enthusiastic, in the sense that the small bird is uh, always chirping. The small bird is always chirping. And because this bird and the bird chirp has a specific sound, wherever the lion wants to go, this bird is always accompanying the lion and it keeps chirping. So everybody in the jungle understands that the lion has come. And the result is, in spite of his great power, the lion does not get his food so easily. There's a great struggle which is accompanied that. So Prabhupada explains about this payu bird which is crying and making this sound, uh, heralding to everyone the lion has come. So please pack up. Uh, and therefore, Srila Prabhupada explains that therefore this bird payu ensures. So it's a very small bird which doesn't have much strength, a very small bird, but the but the addition or the contribution of this bird is good enough to spoil all the power and the prowess which the lion has. And the result is the lion does not get food so easily. He has to great struggle. Okay, that is there. Somehow or the other, Krishna supplies the lion also with food. But Prabhupada highlights on the observation that the lion does not get food every day. So Prabhupada is saying people want to become as powerful as a lion. But if one becomes as powerful as a lion, one will not get his food every day. One should be ready to starve. So the lion may get food sometimes and may get his food sometimes, and then he takes stale. He takes little, whatever animal he has got every day. He keeps eating little. He doesn't get fresh every day. So Prabhupada explains there that one may be very much wanting to become like a lion, very powerful, power like lion. But the effect of that is one will not get fresh food every day. Not get fresh food every day. Prabhupada saying better be vegetarian. So one depending on nature can get fresh grass every day. But one wants to become a lion will not get fresh food every day. So what good is that power? What good is that power? That is the point. Uh, what good is that power worth? Uh, what good is that power worth? In Hiranyakashipu's case itself, we can see Hiranyakashipu had everything. He can get any type of fruits and flowers. He can condition the environment to any temperature, any season. Uh, that so much power he had. So much power he had. And there was one missing small thing. And that missing small thing in his life was his very own son was not devoted and dedicated to him. His very son was surrendered to Lord Vishnu, which he didn't like, but which he could not control. So that was good enough to spoil everything. One small missing thing can not spoils up everything. So this is the first aspect Srila Prabhupada explains uh, about this aspect. So therefore, what good is this material position and power and prowess and accolades? Ah, because even if there is one small thing, there is one crevice, one inability that's good enough uh, to overwhelm and spoil everything. The second aspect, which the sovereignty or choosing the sovereignty of the mind and senses gives us is, or the second aspect is incessant flux. There is incessant flux in this material world. This material world is characterized by this incessant flux. So the change which is happening incessantly, everything is changing incessantly. Uh, everything is changing incessantly. So, and what this change brings about in a person's life, the Shastras explain in many, many places, that this incessant flux, this change, what it brings about in a person's life is titillation. is agitation. And this change brings about this titillation and agitation. Ah, so one is never able to focus on one thing because as soon as one tries to focus on one thing, immediately there is a change of the situation, and one gets attracted to another thing, and then another thing, and then another thing, and then another thing. In this way, Bahushaka hi anantasya buddhayo avyavasayinam. In this way, the Lord explains that one whose mind is not fixed in Krishna, and therefore one who is accepting the sovereignty of the senses and the mind, uh, such a person's consciousness can never be fixed. Such a person is always in a perpetual state of distraction and agitation. Doshaka. Fixity can only come by choosing Lord Krishna as one's only shelter. That is why Vyavasatmika Buddhi Ekeha Kurunandanaha. When one chooses Lord Krishna as the only goal and the whole and the soul, then only there is fixity, the natural fixity. And Srila Prabhupada explains there the purport that this faith that by surrendering to Krishna, everything will be accomplished. All perfection will be accomplished simply by surrendering to Krishna. That faith is what is going to lead to fixity. So when one is on the sensual chase, so the problem with the sensual chase is that it leads to a hazy gaze. And sure enough, that ensures that everything is in due course of time is set ablaze. So therefore, Lord Krishna explains further in 244. Bhogeshwarya prasaktana taya apaharita chetasam. Then he says, Samadho na vidhiyate. That one who is mad after these senses, such a person can never take any determined auspicious action. Prabhupada at one place explains consciousness means Krishna consciousness. If one is conscious, if one is aware, if one is not in a state of delirium, if one is not intoxicated, if one is conscious, normal, then he has to be Krishna conscious, Prabhupada explains. Because Krishna is a reality and everything else is illusion. So if one is not able to see Krishna, that means one is not conscious, one is diseased. That means one is in a state of delirium. Because Prabhupada says consciousness means Krishna consciousness. So in that same sense, we can see here And Krishna is explaining that such a person who is maddened by the sensual pleasure, the senses are showing different titillations, and one who is maddened by these titillations, and such a person is never able to get fixity. Uh, he cannot undertake any determined action uh, of Krishna consciousness, and the actions for Krishna consciousness are the set of actions in Krishna consciousness are the set of actions for auspiciousness. So that means such a person can never take any determined action towards auspiciousness. Any determined auspicious action cannot be undertaken by such a person who is not Krishna conscious. I mean, who is not surrendered to the lotus feet of the Lord. Has not surrendered to the lotus feet of the Lord. So therefore, the material world is agitating. And now, interestingly, because every single day the situations change, the world changes, and the person is shown different kinds of scenes. This is just like, and one keeps running to acquire it. Now, this is just like, say, for example, a kaleidoscope shows different design patterns. Every time one looks at it, it shows different design patterns, and one gets attracted to different design patterns. That design pattern will never be repeated again in the kaleidoscope, and one is chasing after that. All these infinite design patterns are all design patterns of illusion, and therefore, a person keeps running and running and running, nowhere to go or nothing to obtain, and does not obtain anything. Does not obtain anything, and that is the state of Hiranyakashipu. So because uh, so therefore we can see that there is inertia which is existing in this world. Now, when it comes to situations, there is dynamic inertia because the situations are constantly changing, and therefore one's desires will be constantly changing. Therefore, one's desires will be constantly changing, and therefore one's desires will be constantly changing, and therefore one will be eternally, and perpetually dissatisfied. So the situations are in a state of dynamic inertia, which is where there is this changing flux, and the living entity's heart is in the state of static inertia, because one is not getting anything, because all these are illusory flavors of illusion. Therefore, the seventh canto, ninth chapter, Avadut Brahmana is telling Prahlad Maharaj. And Avadut Brahmana is telling that you see, he is telling all these material pleasures are simply a figment of imagination. So he's saying that because all these material pleasures are simply a figment of imagination, everything is a beginning, everything is an end. At best, it is momentary. Uh, So because I have understood and what it can give is simply imagination, therefore I'm just sitting down, not doing anything, lying down. Srila Prabhupada explains this. So this actually Lord Krishna also explains this aspect that a devotee, the fourth chapter, if we see, the Lord explained this in Bhagavad Gita. And the Lord is saying that a devotee who is in knowledge, such a devotee actually does not work. It does not become the cause of work. How does it explain? Don't become the cause of work. Don't become the cause of work. You will suffer if you become the cause of work. That means this devotee, such a devotee does not work. Now, what does that mean? That this devotee does not work means what? That based on what the situation in the world shows, nothing can trigger such a devotee to take any action. This devotee does not take any action on one's own. So the only action which a devotee, a person in knowledge takes is under the dictates of the Lord and the spiritual master. And other than that, one does not act only. Simply lying that one. That's what Avadut Brahman is saying, substantiating what Lord Krishna explains in the fourth chapter, fifth chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Lord is explaining that actually this work, that the living entity does not work. He's not agitated. He cannot be provoked to do some work in any way. uh, by any display or any provocation or any manifestation of the senses in the mind, then a devotee refuses to work. A devotee refuses to work. The devotee only agrees to work when, as per the dictate of the Lord, the instruction of the Lord, are the devotees of the Lord, the spiritual master, his representatives. So, so that is the point. That is the point. Now, uh, the next aspect which is highlighted in the Shastras is that how the choosing the sovereignty of the mind, the senses in the mind, leads to dissatisfaction. Why it leads to dissatisfaction? One another aspect which is explained is uh, newer and newer kinds of so newer and newer kinds of grounds get manifest in front of a person, and one is asked to prove oneself on those grounds. So it does not matter what one has achieved. Material nature always present newer and newer grounds. So one is saying, okay, I mastered this. And material nature is telling, okay, this doesn't matter. This is outdated now in fashion. The new fashion is this trend. Now you master this trend. And by the time one does that, a new platform is visible. So material nature keeps creating these newer and newer grounds. And one is forced and coaxed to prove oneself on these newer and newer grounds. Uh, One is forced to prove oneself in newer and newer grounds. And that's why what now this tantamounts to what this tantamounts to a great strain and a great energy drain and a lot of pain, which is going to be all in vain. Because by the time one becomes the master of something, that concept and that ground and that platform is itself obsolete. This happens. We can uh, so near and near grounds, the material nature shows. Uh, so just like the trends keep changing in this world. Say for example, the technology keeps changing. Every 4 years, the software technology changes. There are some newer and newer. One has to always keep upgrading oneself. Every 10 years, any research field becomes saturated. Every researcher has to change his research field of focus because it becomes saturated. No more publications. Finished. So newer and newer grounds. One is always given to prove oneself on newer and newer grounds. Like say for example, even though Hiranyakashipu conquered everyone, there was a new ground with the Lord manifested in front of him in the form of Prahlad. Now concurrency. And he could not. And he failed. Newer and newer grounds. And that is why one will always be dissatisfied. Prabhupada explains in Coming Back, in the second last chapter or the last chapter in the book Coming Back, Prabhupada explains about this Sisyphus. So the Sisyphus is given punishment. The Sisyphus is what is the punishment? He's given a big rock, no, round spherical boulder, and he has to carry that at the top of the mountain. Great pain he's carrying, trying to prove oneself that I am the king, I am the master, I am I am the winner of all I survey. And he takes it somehow or the other with great pain, great labor. He takes it up at the top of the hill, and then what do the guards do? They throw it down again. Just push it down. And the next task, they say, okay, now you next task. Now what is the next task? Bring it back up again. Bring it back up again. So this is how the mental nature is. So one may say, no, I have achieved everything, and I am the master of all I survey, and so on and so forth. And mental nature just gives one kick, and that rock boulder comes down the mountain, and then the mental nature is saying, okay, bring it back again. That's your next task. Now prove it again. You know? And one takes it again, proves oneself. Mental nature again throws it back. So okay, go back and bring it back again. And this is what is going on for eternity. Prabhupada explains to this effect that therefore many times people are simply after so-called achievements, that these achievements, even if one achieves, even if one is able to achieve the even if one is able to achieve anything. Prabhupada says even if one says, so for example, achieve millions of dollars, his big industries, his empire, industrial empire, but then what does material nature do? So mental nature pushes it back again. How? Death. And next life, one is born as a dog or a hog. So even if one is an MIT professor and born as a dog or a hog in the next life, then what is the use? And Prabhupada says, what is the use? Even if one is a big scientist, is born as a dog or a hog in the next life. What is the gain? What is the gain? So there is Uh, so therefore, this takes us to uh, that therefore therefore there is a great danger which is associated with there is a great danger which is associated with accepting the mind and the senses as one's master. The great danger is that a person goes on, being maddened by the intoxication of power and position. The person goes on performing numerous sinful activities, which lead to a very degraded future, much more unfortunate and shabby. Much more unfortunate and shabby. So therefore, the whole premise of accepting uh, the is very dangerous. And this is the fourth aspect. That this is it is very dangerous because simply by accepting the mind and senses, one is paving the way towards, as master, one is paving the way toward degradation. And so it's not just rewind and redo, but it is degradation. And therefore, the Shastras in one place says that okay, the mind and the masters, the mind and the senses, they're very bad masters. Why? Because their demands never end. Na kripa, na shama, no mercy, no end to it. Uh, they simply keep on demanding more and more and more and more, more and more and more. And therefore, uh, Therefore, the Bhakti Shastras explain or teach us the process of adding Krishna and the process of being satisfied. The process of being satisfied. So when one is not, when one refuses to accept the dominion and the sovereignty of the mind and senses, and chooses Krishna as one's master and Guru's instructions as one's master, then one can be satisfied, truly satisfied. Then only one can be truly satisfied. So when there is Krishna and Krishna's service, and one can be truly satisfied. But if Krishna is not there, there is going to be this perpetual dissatisfaction. So this is the same reason why in the eighth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam it comes, and Lord Vamandev is telling Bali Maharaj, and Lord Vamandev is explaining the same aspect, the same thing. The Lord Vamandev is explaining that even if one has sovereignty of the whole world, but one is unable to control one's own senses, such a person will always be dissatisfied. There is no use of having sovereignty of the whole world. No use of having the sovereignty of the whole world. A person will be perpetually, uh, even if one gets everything, one will still be dissatisfied. One will still be dissatisfied. And therefore, Vamandev is explaining that if I cannot be satisfied in three steps of land, if person is not satisfied, three steps of land cannot be satisfied, even if one has all the seven islands of Bhumandala, all the seven islands of Bhumandala with all the Varshas. So, so Vamandev explains there so that is why only one who has Krishna as one's master, who accepts Krishna as one's master, can be satisfied. Otherwise, uh, one is only progressing these trajectories of dissatisfaction. Let's stop here. Do you have any questions or comments?
And one quick, example. This, when I was here in the '60s, when the Beatles were, and everyone's heard of the Beatles, surely. George Harrison, especially. But I remember when all the Beatles were very big music group. You can't imagine how big, how popular, gigantic, at least, yeah. And they were just huge. They were more famous than anybody else by far. But and George Harrison wrote something several years after the Beatles were done, and he said by the time I was 19 years old, 20 years old, I was at the top of the world. Everything, the whole world was at my feet. I had money, I had anything I wanted. But I just looked around and I realized that it really wasn't substantial at all. It really wasn't anything at all. So anyway, George Harrison, of course, he's a special case because he was a devotee. And so he could, especially after him, but even before he met Prabhupada and devotees, he had that realization that there's no satisfaction in fame, popularity, money. So, anyway, it's a good example for us.
Yes.
And of course, he became a very nice disciple of Prabhupada.
Yes, Lord.
Hare Krishna, amazing class, Prabhu. As always, you share such deep insights. Prabhu, I'm just trying to recall. You mentioned there are four aspects related with accepting the sovereignty of the mind and senses. One was even one missing thing takes over everything else. It overwhelms everything else. Second aspect was there is a constant flux. Third aspect was newer and newer grounds manifesting to prove ourselves. And fourth one was it's degrading as well.
Yes.
And yeah, this was really very wonderful analysis of.
Yeah, we can remember that by the word mind itself. Missing, that is M. Incessant flux, that is I. Newer and newer grounds, that is N. And the danger of degradation, that is Q. The mind as a master.
So, can we title this lecture as a deep analysis of dissatisfaction and tips to conquer it?
Sure.
Really amazing.
So we'll end here. Srila Prabhupada ki